Hi guys, my name is Chris if you didn't already know, and welcome to my show SmegChris Review. And once again I've got two films to review, so let me get on with it. And the first film I'm talking about is the reboot, sequel, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Before I talk about this film, I just want to mention the fact that I remember the original I Know What You Did Last Summer back in 1997, and I thought it was a fantastic movie. I even enjoyed I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, the sequel that came straight afterwards. However, and I know I mentioned this on a previous video not so long ago, that I have no idea what the second sequel was called, because nobody from the original two movies was in that. It went straight to video, so I completely ignored it. I didn't want to know. I still don't want to know. So when they announced a new one, I'm like, ugh. But then I found out that Jennifer Love Hewitt's back in it and Freddie Prinze Jr. and I'm like, okay, I'm interested. And it also answered that question that's been bugging me, especially for years, and probably other people. Did Julie James actually die at the end of the first sequel, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer? Or was it just something she imagined? Well, this film answered that question. She was imagining it, she dreamt it. But she's not actually the main character of this film. Oh no, it sort of starts off pretty much a carbon copy as the original. You know, they're on a cliff top, they've been out partying, they're in the car. However, there is a twist. Whereas in the original they ran somebody over, in this one, or at least one of them's messing about on the road and a car comes speeding up and had to swerve and they go over the cliff. Now, two things. One, if this road is notorious for things happening, surely you don't mess about there. And two, when you're driving up there, you know that there's a bend in the road and, you know, you don't speed in the dark where there's no lights. Anyway, I'm just whining about that little detail. So of course it cuts to a year later. The friends are not exactly friends anymore. They've all gone their separate ways, sort of thing. And it isn't long before we start seeing people getting murdered. And I just have to say that that first killing I thought was quite good actually. And then when we see the murderer with the slicker and the hook, oh wow, did I get goosebumps. It just reminded me of the old days. So yes, that first kill was pretty cool. But then it starts getting a bit, well, not so good. It's more of a murder mystery type of story rather than a slasher movie that we're used to. Don't get me wrong, people start dying, it's just not the right people. In fact, it's people who were not even involved with the accident at all. I guess they had to continue the story somehow. So as per usual, per cliche of these stories, par for the course if you like, the town has a meeting saying, you know, these killings, they were just accidents, you know, there's not a serial killer out there. And then Freddie Prinze Jr. as Ray walks in saying, hold on a minute. Yeah, he did, he went, hold on a minute. No, he didn't. You know, he had to do the cliche of this has happened before and it's happening again and you need to be aware of this and blah blah blah. Yeah, at this point I'm like, it's cool seeing him, but I feel like history's repeating itself, and not just in this franchise. We've seen this a million times before in other slasher films. Anyway, the story starts continuing on. They're trying to figure out who's doing all these killings. And of course they've got to bring Julie James back, so she gets a visit. And at first, another cliche, I don't want anything to do with it, it's nothing to do with me, leave me alone. Yeah. Eventually she'll come around, you know, they always do. But it was nice seeing Jennifer Love Hewitt back in that character. Anyway, the movie rolls on, more killings happen, and it's nothing new. We don't see anything fresh. That first kill, great. After that, it's just like, yeah, we've seen that before. And to be honest, I got to the point where I was starting to lose any interest in these characters. I wanted to see Julie James. That was it. And then in true I Know What You Did Last Summer fashion, we get to see another dream sequence with a character from the past return from the dead. It was great seeing that person, but it wasn't needed. It served no function to the story. So then we get to the third act of the film, the climax, and of course Julie James springs into action finally. And then we find out who's doing all the killing. I don't want to give away spoilers, But there are two sides to this. The first one, you were like, really? Are you really going to go down that alley and reveal that? And sure enough they did, and I felt a little disappointed. I'm like, why? What? Huh? And the explanation we got actually was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But then there's the second part of who's doing all the killing. And when it's revealed, I was like, what? Are you joking? That's a terrible plot twist. Awful. There's no sense in it at all. So by the time that finished and the film finished, I was like, that was a bad ending to a okay film. But I do like what happens at the end where Julie James goes to visit somebody, a cameo from earlier on in the franchise. I'm not saying who because it was a great surprise. But I'm going to be honest, by the time we got to the end of the film, I was starting to feel a little bored, and nothing in it was very inventive. Especially the title, I Know What You Did Last Summer. It's just the same as the first one. Couldn't they have come up with something else? And because of all that, I'm going to give I Know What You Did Last Summer it was a bit underwhelming. Not exactly a worthy sequel. Maybe I'll have it in my collection one day. Maybe I won't. I don't know. Let me just put it this way. For a slasher film, it's not very scary or that entertaining, to be honest. The only saving grace was it was nice seeing returning characters. Okay, now on to my next film, The Fantastic Four: First Steps. Why it's called First Steps? I have no idea. Maybe it has something to do with a baby being in the film who doesn't show up until about halfway through. Just saying. Except the baby never walks. That aside, let me talk about the film. Basically the story is the same as Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. And I ain't kidding. In fact, let me start from the beginning of this film. When it came up as Earth, whatever number it came up with, and you're like, ow. So this isn't the MCU that we're used to. It's an alternate version, an alternate universe of the MCU. So straight away you're like, I don't care about these characters. Right off the bat, right off of that. But then we get to know the characters again, because we've seen them before, twice over. I'm not saying it's a bad casting, it's a good casting. I love Pedro Pascal, he's a great actor. Apart from Wonder Woman 1984, he was terrible in that. Ever since I saw Vanessa Kirby in Fast and Furious Hobbs and Shaw, I've been a fan of hers. The other two, I've no idea who they are. Sorry to say. But it doesn't mean I didn't like them any less. It was a good casting for who the characters were. So at least this time, when we saw the origin story of the Fantastic Four, we didn't have the whole process rehashed once again. It was just shown in little snippets of documentary footage. And then there's a lot of talking, finding out that Sue Storm has gotten pregnant and she's going to have a baby. And, you know, time goes relatively quick in the film, to be quite honest, because before you know it, she's showing. And then we see Silver Surfer show up again. This time a woman, which I thought was a good choice. However, pretty much saying the same thing as we saw in Rise of the Silver Surfer. It's alright, I'm from Yorkshire, I can't say the unless I have to say t. And pretty much spouts the same thing, that Galactus is coming. And we're like, yeah, we know, we've seen this before. However, this time, instead of just waiting for Galactus to show up, the Fantastic Four decide they're going to go see Galactus and go talk to him. Which I thought was pretty interesting. It was a good adventure and all that. And at least this time we actually get the real Galactus, not just some great big giant cloud that's trying to suck the earth dry. No, this is Galactus. And that's one of the big differences between this film and Rise of the Silver Surfer. We get a proper Galactus. And so the film continues on, the baby is born in a very unique way, and I was entertained by that. And of course, when Galactus shows up to Earth, that's when things really kick off. But it seemed to take far too long to get to that plot point. Now here's some of the stuff that I didn't like about the film. The costumes, for example. Didn't like them at all. I even preferred the last Fantastic Four costumes, even though that was an awful film. That was terrible. The less said about that one, the better. Also, when it came to superheroics, we didn't really see that much. Most of it was pretty much flashbacks. And as for the story, there wasn't really that much involved. It was pretty much, like I said, the same as Rise of the Silver Surfer. Just a lot more talking. I mean, that's one of the drawbacks of this film, is there is far too much talking, and I found myself starting to let my mind wander, honestly. But for a Marvel film, this one's pretty much mediocre, I have to say it. I'm sorry. But just know that the final battle of the film is pretty decent. But in my honest opinion, Rise of the Silver Surfer is a far better film than this one. And so I'm going to give the Fantastic Four First Steps some great actors in there. There's some great sequences, but a lot of slow ones too. And just before I finish up, there are 2 post-credit scenes, as Marvel tend to do. The first one you do want to stick around for because it's setting up for the next Avengers film. The second one, you don't really need to. Just wait for it to come on Disney Plus or whatever and watch it then. It's not really worth sticking around 10 minutes for as the credits roll. Anyway guys, that's it for this video. All that's left for me to say now is thank you for watching and subscribing if you have, and liking this video if you did. Until the next time, peace out. Going back to I Know What You Did Last Summer, it's nice seeing characters return from years ago, or decades ago in fact, which seems to be a common trend recently, and I'm here for it. Sometimes it works, like Ghostbusters and Bill and Ted. Sometimes though, it doesn't work. Indiana Jones, for example. That last one was terrible. Sorry, but it's true.